Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to yet another segment of Asaph Cafe. I am your host, Asaph Adonai, and immediately on my left, affectionately, our aging rocker, Emmett, and we're going to do a one-on-one, and through the magic of green screen technology, we are on the set of the original Lawrence Welk Show. And this is early Lawrence Welk, you know, when he was sponsored by Dodge and Plymouth.
Yep.
So we're going to talk about Lawrence Welk today, and we'll talk about other subjects. But before we do, let you start us off.
Heavenly Father, bless our food and our time together in Jesus' name.
And God, just fill me with your Holy Spirit
Yes,
and
Lord.
help me to host this show and bless Emmett. Amen. Okay. This is so cool. I mean,
Yes.
ever since we lost Chuck Barris, and I'm sorry we lost him, you know, we did that tribute on the
Yes.
Gong Show, and that's how this whole experimentation started with different backdrops. And I got a compliment today from Christian. He said he thought it was a great idea.
Oh, it is.
To use these backdrops. We've been on the Gong Show, we've been on Wheel of Fortune, we've been on the Bridge of the Enterprise, we've been in Liberace's home, in the Bat Cave with Adam West, and now we're on the Lawrence Welk Show. This is the original Lawrence Welk Show. You can see Mr. Welk there behind you. There with his baton, a one and a two. So we'll do some easy listening for sure with this topic here. But Lawrence Welk left a great legacy. He's gone now, but he left the world some great music.
Yeah.
And everybody in America watched the Lawrence Welk Show. I think it was on every Sunday night, if I remember.
It was, yeah.
And everybody in America watched this show. My mom, my birth mom, she would be cooking dinner, and the television would be on, and you have the Lawrence Welk music you can hear in the background. My father would just be working around the house, whatever. They had the TV on, and I was pretty young at that time still. Because his show first aired in 1955. Does that book say that?
I'm sure it does, yes.
Yeah, and it was on for a while. I'm going to go more into detail about his life, but I just wanted to, I'm just setting up the synopsis right now. But I was relatively young, and what I used to do is I would just sit in front of the television when my mother was cooking and just watch Lawrence Welk, and it was a blast.
Yeah, it was.
And he left the world a wonderful legacy. So I'm very humbled to get this chance to do this version of Asaph Cafe. And let's start off with a song that I think Lawrence Welk would like if he were here.
Now, I don't know how I first started. It was in, I think, in 1983. I think it was just on wherever, because it's still on ABC or whatever syndicated channel it was on. But I just turned it on, and there it was, and I just loved it. That was my first introduction to easy listening, was the Lawrence Welk Show, and I was hooked.
Okay.
And then it was on Lewiston, Idaho. Then later I heard KOZ FM Lewiston, and I played that on my show, The Awful Truth About Society. Easy listening, 24/7. I called it the Lawrence Welk Channel. The Lawrence Welk Station, radio station, because it played Lawrence Welk type music, and I think even some songs by Lawrence Welk and from his records. I called it the Lawrence Welk radio station. It's actually Cozy FM. I just loved it, you know, and so that was my first venture into easy listening.
This is called The Tango, the song.
Yeah. I've often thought, just like Elvis Presley's been considered the king of rock and roll, I think Lawrence Welk should be considered the king of easy listening orchestras and easy listening music. That's what he played every week.
I
Easy
agree.
listening shtick. Beautiful.
Yeah, but from what I understand about Lawrence Welk, his show started in 1955. And I think before it went on ABC, there was I think it's KTLA television in Los Angeles. I don't know if you've ever heard of that or not. And I don't know if they're still in existence. And I think from what I understood, they were doing a series of tests.
Yes.
His show, he's from North Dakota, and I think originally he did some shows in North Dakota. Then they went to Los Angeles and they did a series of test shows for KTLA television, and then it got picked up by ABC and it just launched off. That's my understanding of his history. And his original shows were black and white.
I've seen some of those on PBS, yes.
And then eventually got to this point that we're on. See, I didn't want to use the more older Lawrence Welk set, the more current before it went off the air. I think this is the right set. So he was at the right place at the right time. He got blessed. He got the show going, and it was always fun to listen to the Lawrence Welk show.
It was.
It was fun to watch it. And you know what I appreciated about his show? The wholesomeness of it.
Exactly.
It was this good, clean family.
That's what he wanted to do.
And I know that some of the comedians of the time might have picked on him.
Yeah.
As far as the type show he had. But you can pick on this man. But you can't pick on the quality of his show.
Exactly.
Lawrence Welk probably had the best show.
I think you're right.
Not only on television at that time, but in history. The best in history. So we can do this tribute to Lawrence Welk.
Absolutely.
And I'll probably send this to the Lawrence Welk Network and let them get a kick out of it. But in the meantime, let's just talk about it. And you've got his book here. Let me see.
I special ordered this from...
Where did you get this book from?
I think it was the Bird's Nest. A special order was right there because I'd seen it. I was like, I'd like to really get that.
How long have you had this book?
I'm thinking, oh man, that's at least 10 to 15 years.
Okay, it probably won't show up on camera, but this is one of the books that was written about Lawrence Welk. It's called Awana Atua, Life with My Musical Family, Lawrence Welk with Bernice Majian, I think is how it's pronounced. And this was one of his books here, and we can talk about the subjects of his book. It probably won't show up on camera, but
I can move it closer to the camera.
Okay, go ahead.
I have to do this on my show. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There it is, yeah. Good shot.
Yeah, almost looks kind of like it's kind of fading.
Well, that's because we're on a green screen, so that's the best we can do. But at least the television audience can get an idea.
Yes, I've loved this because I think I was reading it even in one of my older apartments. I've had it for a while, at least 10 years.
Well, let's talk about, since you read it, I'll let you start the conversation. I'll play some chords and we can talk about that. Anything in particular about that book you want to talk about?
It's just a fascinating read. I've read it several times through.
Okay.
I think I had seen a copy somewhere at the Senior Citizen Center because, like you, a friend of mine used to live at the Senior Citizen Center of the library, and I thought, this looks like something good, so I ordered it from, I think, the Bird's Nest, or it was at the Bird's Nest, or some other place that has used and rare out-of-print books, because technically it's out of print. And it was written by Lawrence Welk, and he has such quite a writing style that he made the stories fascinating, like he was talking to you, you could see mentally the images right there. I mean, and it's all true, but he has a warm style with this. I just loved it. I even would, highlight some of the stuff. It's just a comforting book, especially read maybe with a cup of tea at night and a bowl of ice cream or something.
Right. That was the theme to Hill Street Blues,
the
television show of the past. So I'll play some easy listening songs while we're talking about Mr. Welk, and let's just do a little tribute to him and his show here.
Yeah.
Does that book say where he's from?
Yeah, it does. You said North Dakota. I'm sure it does.
Yeah, but he wasn't born in North Dakota, was he?
I can't remember.
Okay. Well, I know as far as his music show, just a class act,
Let's see. This book is about my musical family. I can't do a very good Lawrence Welk impersonation.
Well, you don't have to. Just use your normal voice and tell the audience.
When the thought first came to me to do a book about our orchestra, for copyright reasons, obviously I'm not going to read the whole book. I'll just read snippets and we can have it. And how it operates. I decided to tell the whole story, the bad as well as the good. To take you backstage and let you see exactly the kind of people we are. In my first book, Wonderful, Wonderful, I talked about my own life. The second book is about the people who make up the family.
Oh, I see.
Become such a big part of my life.
So the first book was more about him, right?
Yeah, this one was more about his musical family.
Yeah, well, that's cool. He had a pretty cool musical family.
He did.
Can you hand me a couple of tissues there? I'm going to need one there.
Yeah.
And let me see that book again. Let me look at it. Ooh, excuse me. Oh, this picture here in the back. The back of your book, that was a picture originally we were going to use. But I think this one is more appropriate.
Yes.
But we could have used that picture there. But some of the performers, if I can remember, the accordion player, Myron Florin, what an accomplished artist.
Yep. Definitely.
Excuse me. Yeah, he's probably the best accordionist in history.
Oh yeah, I have a couple of his albums.
Yeah.
Man, he was fantastic.
Oh my goodness, yeah, that's an understatement.
I just
there.
love his polka stuff, and I have stuff with Maranatha. Oh man, it's so good.
Let's play the theme to the Lawrence Welk Show. Okay.
When I finished this book, however, I was a little worried that maybe I talked too much. But I spoke with various members of our group, and every one of them gave me his blessing and allowed me to go ahead with it, even though I revealed many of the trouble spots and heartaches which have plagued us over the years. You will find, as you read this, we are not perfect human beings who never make mistakes. We are human just as you are, and we falter and fall time and again. But I think you'll also find, as I know in my heart, that the folks in our musical family are the most talented, loyal, and cooperative to be found anywhere. I have only deep gratitude for the wonderful job they have done for me. I am, of course, an extremely lucky man. I have not only my own family, my wife, children, and grandchildren, but also my wonderful musical family, and the family of fans and friends that have supported us so loyally over the years. This book is dedicated to all of you.
So it's just mostly talks about his musical family. Right? Now, does it say how many years he was married?
It didn't. I can't remember if it did.
I think he was married to a lady named Fran, right? Am I right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and that's interesting that she supported him over those years as far as what he did for a living.
Yes,
that's
indeed.
very rare in the entertainment business. When
I know.
Have a direction like that, to have a spouse that's supportive like that. And I don't mean that critically when I'm saying that, I'm just telling the truth. So he was really lucky to have had that.
Yeah. First chapter, a door opens. I'm just going to skim them and we can talk about something.
Okay, sure.
It's never easy to be fired. It's even harder when you're 68 years old and you know that 200 other people will lose their jobs if you lose yours.
That's correct, and that's what happened.
Yes, it is. They're talking about.
I'm familiar with that story. ABC made the decision to end the show because they wanted a younger audience, and I think ABC made a bad mistake.
They did. It was a colossal mistake as far as I'm concerned.
If I were the executive back then of ABC, I would never have done it. I would have said, you do that show to your teeth fall out.
Exactly.
Because you can always get a guest announcer, you announce a song or two and then let the younger one announce and just keep that show going. That's what they did with the evangelist Billy Graham. Did you see his last sermon?
No, I didn't.
His very last sermon was...
Is he still alive?
Yeah, he's like 96 or 97. But his last sermon, I think, was the best sermon he ever did. And how they did it, like we were talking about what they could have done with Mr. Welk, instead of him being, in the Coliseum, in the pulpit, because he was 90-something, he was in his home, just sitting in his living room. He had a little piano in the background, just in his living room, and he was very comfortable. They made him comfortable, and he just said a few words, and then they would show younger people being interviewed throughout the show. Stuff like that, and then they go back to Mr. Graham, say a few words, until they got to the invitation. And when they got to the invitation, of course, he said the sinner's prayer, but he was just relaxed in his chair and asking the audience, whoever was watching, to repeat the prayer.
That's wonderful, yeah.
And they could have done something like that with Lawrence Welk. Maybe not an invitation per se, but what I'm saying is when he got physically older, they could have kept that going. They could have got younger announcers coming in and just show him once in a while and keep it going.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
But ABC, not to dog on them, but that was just a bad judgment call.
It was a terrible
in my
one,
opinion.
yeah.
And we live in a culture where people want youth.
I know, it's ridiculous, yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but you can't just scoot someone out all of a sudden because they're not in their prime anymore.
Yeah,
That's
even the
crazy.
Bible says somewhere, I think in the Psalms, stand up for the hoary old head.
Yeah, that's
honor the elderly.
Yeah, and they could have done that with the Welk Show because he left a great show. I mean, there's no question his band was absolutely tight.
Oh man, it was
probably
fantastic.
the best big band in history.
Yeah. Like I said, he's the king of easy listening.
Yeah, I know they may have had those other bands like, say...
Percy Faith and his orchestra, David Rose and his orchestra, so many others.
And some that might have maybe had a bigger name, but Lawrence Welk just was like a solid...
Dynamo, yeah.
Yeah, what's the word I'm thinking of? There's a word I'm thinking of, I can think of it. Something that... I can't think of the word right now, but his show was just like a backbone. It was just there.
Yeah.
Security, that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the word I'm thinking of, security. Secure.
Yep. But that's what happened to me one day in March of 1971, and even now, whenever I think about it, I get a kind of sick feeling. I've been hoping against hope for months that the American Broadcasting Company would keep our musical show on the air, just as they had for the previous 16 years. I was aware, of course, that a great many other television programs had been canceled during the 1970-71 season, but I hadn't been seriously concerned about ours at first. For one thing, we had been on the air nationwide every week for those 16 years, the only musical show on television to make that kind of record. Also, we had a very large and very loyal audience. Our ratings had always held up consistently, and I knew that our sponsors were happy with us. So it didn't seem reasonable to me that ABC would cancel us. But when they failed to renew their option early in March, as I always had before, I felt a real stab of worry, and I dispatched my manager agents, Don Fredersen and Sam Lutz, to New York to find out exactly where we stood.
Right.
When they returned, they didn't know a whole lot more than they had when they left. The thing is, Lawrence, said Don, running a hand through his thick sand-coated hair, everything is in a turmoil right now. The Federal Communications Director has everyone fired up, and also, ABC has committed itself totally to the youth wave. He paused.
See, that's what we were just talking about.
Exactly.
This was a song that they would probably play on the Lawrence Welk Show.
But you're very much still in the running, and Elton has told me they won't make any decision for a few more weeks. Elton was Elton Rule, president of ABC, and a man with whom we'd always enjoyed a fine relationship. I was both encouraged and dismayed by his report. I knew that the Federal Communications Directive, to which he referred, had ordered the 3 major networks to run a half-hour primetime to local stations, hoping that this would stimulate more creativity on their part and lessen the power of the networks. In theory, I was in complete agreement with this idea, but the directives have seemed to throw the networks into a panic, and they have been lopping off long-established shows left and right. In addition, there was a growing reliance at that time on the science of demographics, breaking down a viewing audience to its age, sex, and economic status. The trend then was aiming more and more shows to the teenage audience in the belief that they were the ones who had brought in the most advertised products, or else their parents brought the product for them. As a result, network heads began developing programs that appeal to a very young audience instead of those appealing to other age groups like you and I were just talking about.
Yeah.
I knew all this and a little more was disturbing, particularly since we had known as a show which had a great many mothers and fathers among the viewers. But I always had felt they were more of a family audience than anything else.
Yeah.
Much more included people of all ages. Also, a survey of our own indicated that we were beginning to attract more and more young people every week ourselves. So I managed to stay very hopeful. Let's see. Let's see if I want to kind of skip over some of this important. Let's see.
Well, just give us a flyover. It doesn't have to be like detail, but I got the gist of it. We were talking about younger people and so on.
Somewhere in the middle of it all, I celebrated my 68th birthday, although celebrate is not perhaps the right word. I asked my family to forego the usual party. Instead, I opened hundreds of beautiful cards in my den at home and worked on a magazine article until late that night. But I couldn't concentrate, and every time the phone rang, my heart skipped a beat. Finally, on Monday, March 15th, Don did receive a call from ABC in New York asking for 1 week's option on the show and indicating they would reach a decision momentarily. We were jubilant, and over the spirits shot right up to the skies. Next day, however, they plunged right down again when we read an item in one of the trade papers that the show had been canceled. My secretary, Lois Lamont, burst into tears when she read it, but almost before I had a chance to offer her my hanky, we received an apologetic phone call assuring us that the report had been false. And the combined sigh of relief from everyone in the office nearly blew the offending newspaper right off the desk. Well, he was sick. He was sick, and he agreed to play a weekend golf tournament in Escondido. And he was tucked away in his blanket, and I think this was a bad mistake. He had agreed to a friend of his to play golf, and when you're sick with a terrible cold, you don't play golf or go to a show.
Is that what made him start getting more sicker?
I don't know. This was 1971 or 70. So.
Well, I know, you're right. If you're sick, you need to let your body rest.
Yeah, he died like around 1990s, 89 or 90.
I wondered that might have been the beginning.
It might have been, because he said he had the worst cold he had ever had in his life by then and would have welcomed a chance to stay in bed the next day. He should have. He decided, I'm going to play golf, but you don't want to bring your sicknesses to everybody else. Even if I'm sick, I don't go to church, because I don't want to share my diseases with the rest of the congregation. But anyway, sleep was impossible. It was right. I gave up and climbed back into the front seat. Once out on the golf course, I felt better. The fresh air and total concentration with golf demands always helps me forget my troubles. I was in, let's see. Then he went back to the office, and I sat where I was in the motel office, unable to move, almost unable to talk, because that phone call ended my world entirely.
Is that, you mean when he got the final call?
Yeah, the call had not been from ABC as expected. It had been from a reporter in New York who asked me almost casually how I felt about the fact that our show had just been canceled. ABC had just released its official list of shows for the new fall season, and he said, "And you're not on the list. How do you feel about that, Mr. Welk?" For a second or two, I really couldn't answer him, but somehow I dredged enough strength to say I felt far worse for our musical family than I did for myself.
Yeah, because they're out of work.
Yeah, and they had families and kids to support. That's not, I added that I hoped we could find some way to stay on the air, and even to me, my voice sounded quite calm and steady. But my hands shook when I tried to hang up the phone, and I couldn't have moved even if I'd wanted to. Seconds before, I'd been a man with a 45-piece musical group, an orchestra, and a show that had been on television for 20 consecutive years, 16 of them nationwide. Now I had nothing. No show, no contracts, no firm future to offer my musical family, nothing. I felt just as bad as a man can feel. In fact,
I can only imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, when I first heard those words from the reporter, I died a little. There's no other way to describe it. Well, I would have been crying. I just would have been, I mean, after a while, I got up stiffly like an old man and went back to the back way toward the hill again to my mobile home. The evening shadows were beginning to lengthen, and I was grateful for them. I wanted to slip away and hide for a while, be alone and think this thing through. At the house, I called the switchboard and asked them to hold my calls. I knew I would have to face inquiries from other reporters before long, and I tried to steel myself and compose little speeches, but I couldn't. I had made myself believe so thoroughly that we couldn't lose, that I really hadn't thought about what to say if we were canceled. Now I found I couldn't. It got completely dark outside with a little light filtering. He felt that time, but I was dazed, and suddenly time itself slipped away, and I felt almost as I had 40 years earlier on the night my entire band had walked out on me in Dallas, South Dakota. That time I had felt numb and sick. The fellows made it very plain that they were leaving because they believed I would never make it in the music business, and I was the one who was holding them all back. I had felt ashamed, almost destroyed by what they did that night. And yet I thought with a sudden spurt of hope I had been able to make it. Only then I'd been in my 20s. Now I was close to 70. I wonder if that wasn't the Honolulu...
I'm going to stop on that note. Go ahead.
Would that have been the Honolulu Fruit Orchestra?
I don't know. That I don't know. But let's talk about that.
Yes.
The people... It's funny how you can have a dream in your life.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be, they say, naysayers.
Exactly.
People who don't believe in your dream. And let me tell you something. If someone doesn't believe in your dream...
Yeah.
You might as well not have them in the scene because they're just gonna create havoc.
Exactly.
And it's like they'll try to slow you down.
Yeah.
I think it's human nature. It may not be because they're bad people, but
maybe they're jealous.
No. What could be jealous? But more than that, it's just. I think it's human nature, and I'll tell you why. Because I have a friend of mine that did a paper in college on the Industrial Revolution. Here's where I'm going with this. Remember what people did for work before the Industrial Revolution? They worked for themselves pretty much like that TV show Little House on the Prairie with Michael Landon, they just kind of did their own job. And then they started evolving the culture, with the invention of the railroads and machinery. And they created that 9-to-5 system where they were hiring workers to help lay the railroad tracks and stuff like that Kung Fu movie with David Carradine. And that was a new system or standard of work. Yeah. And then as time evolved, it became the normal standard of work because you had a steady paycheck every week, and there's nothing wrong with that. And there were some people who didn't adhere to that 9-to-5 system. And of course, as time went by, it's the same thing. So where I'm going with this is if you're like in the arts, like say Mr. Welk here, for example, who didn't necessarily work the 9-to-5 system, people freak out because they think, okay, you're not going to get that steady check like when they had the Industrial Revolution thing. So that's what causes that. because people, they have their confidence in that paycheck instead of God taking care of them or something like that. And I think Mr. Welk believed in himself at that time in his life and believed that his dream was going to work. And there were probably people who didn't because it didn't materialize fast enough by their standard. And I can relate to that in a small sense, you know, being a pianist.
Yeah.
And I wrote about that in my autobiography
Yes.
too. There's always, whenever you want to be in the arts, whether it's sports or journalism or drama or music or acting or ballet, there's always going to be people who are going to say, you need to get a real job. Whatever a real job is. I mean, what's a real job, you know? And I can only assume Mr. Welk must have felt that way.
Oh, yeah.
When his band walked out, we don't think you're going to make it. And they probably judged him because of his accent.
Oh, yeah.
All that other stuff. And look what happened.
Exactly.
So, but if you have a dream, I always tell people, if you have a dream, go for it. Follow your dream. And if people don't believe in it, you just got to get the right people in your life that do.
My dream, if I had a dream job, would be to get paid to sleep. But anyway,
maybe if they were looking for a mannequin in a window or something.
Yeah,
Macy's store.
That's a great idea.
So
I got up and began to pace the floor, rest and sleep. What should I do? What could I do? I could retire. I thought about it ironically, and Fern and our daughters, Shirley and Donna, had been urging me to do so for a long time. But some of the men on my band had been with me 25 years or more. They were as close to me as brothers, and some of the youngsters in the group, just starting out, were as dear to me as if they were my own. I couldn't just walk out and leave them. I wondered if our family would be upset, if we would get any reaction from them. I wondered wretchedly if my good friend and sponsor, Matty Rosenhaus, would be disappointed in us and feel that we had somehow let him down. And I wondered wearily what would have happened if we had done things differently, worked a little harder, tried different formats. They were all hard questions, and no easy answer. And I knew, of course, then there was my musical family, you know, my kids, what was going to happen with them. They have family to take care of, I'm just paraphrasing. And I knew, sitting there in the dark, that I could never let them down. I tried my best to keep things going so they would have some kind of security, and if I act confident, I'd act confident and cheerful if it killed me. Might not help us stay in business, but it'll certainly help our morale. I was almost surprised at how bad I felt. I thought that the worst time in my life was that night in Dallas when my whole band had rejected me. But I realized, sitting there alone in the dark, that something far worse had happened, because then I had just Fern myself to think about. Now I had a whole family. I don't know how long I sat there, maybe half an hour, maybe only 5 minutes, but eventually I began to get control of myself. I got up, turned on a few lights, and the place didn't look so much like a funeral parlor, switched on the stereo for the music that revives me, and went to take a shower. I already had invited 16 friends for dinner that night, and cancel, show or not, I would keep that date. In the shower, I could hear the bedside phone beginning to ring. By the time I was out and towelling dry, it began to ring without stopping. I pulled on my robe and began to take the calls. First Don, sick at heart when he discovered he had been told the news so badly. He himself had just been notified by the ABC and be calling me every 10 minutes hoping to beat the reporters. I assured him I was fine and I was talking with Sam, and then Fern, who said loyally, "Lawrence, please don't feel bad if your bubble machine is broken down. You've proved your point and you've earned a rest." Just hearing from her made me feel better, and by the time I was dressed on my way to the restaurant, my spirits were beginning to rise. When I walked into the dining room and it was met by a burst of warm and friendly applause from the guests, I felt even better. Applause always stimulates me. Talking about the whole thing helped too, and I discovered I could even joke about it. Well, you know, it isn't so bad that I mind getting fired, I told everybody. But did they have to pull me off the golf course to tell me about it? Now that's just too much. We had no longer sat down for dinner than the waitress came up to me and had another very important long-distance call. After the one I just received, I wasn't too anxious to take another. Asking if I can call back, will you please, I said. We're just starting to eat. She nodded and went away. A moment later, she said again, a little harassed, "I'm sorry, Mr. Welk," she whispered, "but they insist on talking to you. They say it's most important." Very well. I put down my napkin, excused myself, and went to the foyer to take the call, mentally composing a cheerful little speech for the reporter. But it was not a reporter. It was my sponsor, Matty Rosenhaus, and if I live to be 100, I'll never forget what he said. "Lawrence," his voice was warm with concern, and the news came quickly. "Lawrence, we've just heard the bad news.
Right.
Now listen, don't worry. You'll be right back on top again. I know it. And no matter what direction you take to get there, well, we want to go along with you." He paused and added simply, "Lawrence, I believe in you.
Right.
It's funny how your world can go full circle in just a few hours.
Oh, yeah.
At 4 o'clock that afternoon, I've been crushed, just sickened that my hopes and dreams that have accomplishment in 20 years have been wiped out so quickly, almost casually. I've been half convinced that our professional life was over. Yet here I was, 7 o'clock, feeling I'd been giving a whole new lease on life. I practically ran back to our table where I tapped on a water glass for everyone's attention. Then, looking at the circle of dear and familiar faces, I said, "Friends, something almost unbelievable has just happened." That call was from Manesi Rosenhaus, and he said, to my horror, I can feel my voice starting to thicken, so I stopped and cleared my throat and tried again.
Right.
He said, no matter what direction we've decided to go with the band, he would like to go along with us. And Matty says that he still believes in me. I'm afraid the tears did come then, but they were tears of joy, releasing all the pain and anguish of the worry of the past harrowing weeks.
Right.
I got busy explaining to everyone that I was wiping my eyes because I had such a terrible cold, but I don't think anyone was twofold. Most of them were in tears themselves as they began crowding around me, congratulating me, shaking my hand. Bert and Nancy Carter, who had been instrumental in giving me television in the first place, they were the first to rush up, and little Nancy, who was barely 5 feet tall, flung her arms around me and hugged me tightly. "Oh, Lawrence," she whispered, fiercely, tears and shining in her eyes, "that's just wonderful, wonderful. You're not down yet." I hugged her back. No, we were not down yet, not by a long shot. We had a long way to go, true, and then at that moment I had no clear idea just how which way we'd be going. I only knew that with Maddie's faith and confidence in us, we were on our way again.
And that's exactly what happened. Now let's talk about some of the other performers on his show.
All right.
Like the lovely and beautiful Anna Connie. Do you
Yes,
remember her?
absolutely.
Oh, that lady. I'm sure she's attractive now. But
Oh,
in
yeah,
her
she was
time-
incredible. You mean her
Oh,
little
my
Mexican
goodness.
senior Anna Connie, and she had a
Oh.
family of her own, too.
Yeah,
Incredible.
I used to drool in front of that television
Yeah.
set watching this young woman
Yeah,
sing. And
she
I
was just
like,
incredible.
Where did they find
I
this
know, the lady in
gorgeous
red,
woman?
yeah.
Oh, she was such a
She's so
beautiful
talented,
and,
yeah.
and sweet and talented. Yeah, and she brought the Mexican Hispanic flavor to the show.
Yeah.
And let's see, I always appreciated Arthur Duncan.
Arthur Duncan was incredible.
Oh my goodness, the dancer.
Yeah.
He just brought such class act to that show.
He did. It was incredible.
Just such a skilled. I don't know anything about tap dancing, but
Yeah.
he was so.
Oh, he was so good at it.
Fun to watch.
Yeah, and it was almost like graceful clumsiness. He was fantastic at tap dancing.
And
he
do you
made
remember that? Yeah, he did. Do you remember that singer with the low baritone voice? I can't. Larry
Hooper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was always.
Oh, yeah.
So fun to watch because he would sing.
Ew. Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, I can't do it.
Yeah,
but
Sissy and Bobby were a great dancers.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Sissy and Bobby, they were just a darling.
And Mary Lou
Metzger,
Metzger,
yes.
she was one of the original dancers of this show.
wonderful. Yes.
And she was hot too.
Yeah.
So it was
Who
fun.
was the queen of ragtime piano? The person of ragtime. What was
there
her-
were two. Well,
Oh, I don't
Joanne Castle.
Yeah, Joanne
was.
Castle, ragtime. Yeah.
And then there was another guy, another pianist before her. I think his name was Big Tiny or something.
Yeah.
And then they did that ragtime. I can't do it very well because I don't do that style of piano play, but it was something like
Yeah.
this. Let's try to maple theme.
And then we had, of course, the Champagne lady, Norma Zimmer. Remember Norma Zimmer, the Champagne lady?
Yeah.
lady?
She had a really distinct. I can't do that. I don't know how to play maple leaf.
Yeah, I know.
Because I don't do that kind of piano playing. But Norma Zimmer, she just had that distinctive sounding way of singing. I can't describe it. It always made me think of a Walt Disney.
I know.
Like Snow White.
You know, the interest...
It was really good, you know. I appreciate. What I'm saying is I liked all the performers.
Yeah. I learned something interesting on one of my music choice channels when they're doing little factoids on Easy Listen to Lawrence Welk. Lawrence Welk fired one of his Champagne ladies before Norma Zimmer simply because she showed in her dress a little bit of ankle.
Okay, I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, but he was so strict on dress codes and modesty that he felt just coming over to here was a little immodest and said, oh, whatever the Champagne lady was, you're fired. We're choosing someone else. He was
Okay.
that strict.
Now that I can't comment because I'm not aware of that, but you know,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with modesty.
Exactly. There's
There-
nothing wrong with modesty.
Look, I watch Baywatch too. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I like looking at the pretty girls in the
Yeah.
bathing suit, but for something like Lawrence Welk, I
Yeah,
don't
absolutely. You have to keep it very strict like that.
and I understand that, and there's nothing wrong.
Nothing wrong at all.
with
Yeah.
that. So, and let's see, who else can we talk about? I don't remember the Irish singer's name.
Joe Feeney.
That's right, Joe Feeney.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was always a lot of fun to watch. And
Yeah.
then they always had different guests
Oh yeah, they
guests
did.
on the show every once in a while. Like one time they had Roger Williams, the classical pianist from the 60s, the pianist from the 60s, classical popular. And I saw the episode when they had Henry Mancini on there
Yep.
doing all those songs that he made famous. And I even saw the episode when they had Jack Benny on. Now, normally Mr. Welk didn't have comedians on, but Jack Benny was an accomplished violinist in real life.
Oh yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah.
I think.
No, I mean, I know he did a lot of comedy, goofing off on the violin, but in real life he was very accomplished, classically trained violinist. So that was appropriate to have.
Yeah. There was one
comedian
funny
on.
show or story that I wished I have it on videotape somewhere in my archive of videotapes, and I can't remember where it was. This is something Lawrence Welk did. I think this was before he got canceled.
Oh,
Before he got
okay.
canceled, and he wrote about it in this book, and he even had a picture of it somewhere in where, and it was a true story. I wish I could. You know, I don't have everything right.
Well, I've never actually read that book, so I wouldn't know where to
in
tell you to
front
look.
of but Lawrence Welk, in a good mood in the premiere of one of his new seasons, kind of like you have seasons on your show, he dressed up as a hippie.
Oh, I remember that. I did see that. He got a lot of heat for that.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, I showed that
I
to you.
remember
Oh,
that. I
man.
remember when that actually aired. He was a hippie, and
he
everybody
pretended-
freaked out.
Yeah, they couldn't recognize him or anything.
And then he took the hippie outfit off
Yeah,
and
yeah,
had
yeah.
his suit on.
Yeah, and I thought it was great.
Yeah,
I
I
thought
did-
what he was doing. I
It
thought
didn't
it was
bother
hilarious.
me. I just thought it was like a
hilarious.
comical. No, I don't know if he got in trouble with sponsors or anything.
He
like
didn't,
that,
but a lot of his fans went, "What the heck's
Oh
going
yeah,
on?" I guess there's
think
another one.
It took him a while to recover from that.
It
from
did.
what I understand.
As a matter of fact, here's the picture of when he went hippie.
Yeah. Let me
Oh
see
man!
that.
And you know, thing is, when he was on just live shows, they would have big band thing. Or they did this on his show, and he also did this in concert on tour. But then he would just take off his wigs.
Yeah, that's what he did on the show. Yeah, when he was
Yeah.
the hippie. You can show that on camera.
Yeah, and a lot of people, if they couldn't see the actors very well and the other dancers, a lot of them just thought, well, here's
It probably
another
won't
one.
show up very well, but no, he didn't mean any harm. by
No,
that.
it was just
No.
funny. This one where he went, with hippie, he went completely.
Yeah.
hippie. You can't see it very well on the green screen. I'm sorry.
Well, probably not, but yeah, I remember that. I remember when
I
it
thought it was
actually
hilarious.
aired.
Yes, I saw it. Yeah.
Well, you know, some people, they just
They don't understand humor.
yeah, they just freak out. You know.
They thought it was for real, and they thought, here's another one gone
Yeah.
bad. And he even wrote, it took a long time for people to warm up to him again for some reason.
Well,
It
I
was
think
just a
people
joke.
overreacted. Yeah, but
I thought it was adorable. I thought it was
Yeah.
the most hilarious thing I ever saw in my life.
you know, it just gets back to we're almost out of time. This went by so quickly.
Yeah.
We have 5 minutes left. But no, he just. I guess to sum this up, Lawrence Welk was just a fantastic director,
He was.
and I think he was a great accordion player.
Oh, he was a fantastic accordion player.
And he had a just top-notch class act show.
He did.
The best show in history, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, actually, one of the best. Well, it's hard to beat Star Trek.
Well, okay.
Okay, well,
Trekkies,
if here's a
okay,
really
music show. Go ahead.
Here's a really great idea. If you wanted the best show in history, if the crew of the Enterprise had slingshot back in time, or gotten back in a time warp, and they found the Lawrence Welk Orchestra.
Oh, they would.
Now that would have been great.
Yeah, well, I guess the producers probably didn't think of that.
But that would have been, they were the two best shows on television, that and Battlestar Galactica.
Well, let me make a quick pitch here. Most of the people in the television audience know that I'm attempting to bring this Lawrence Welk show back to life. The show is called Music with Asaph, a remake update of the Lawrence Welk Show, and it's on YouTube. And I sent the OETA Lawrence Welk Network the DVD version of this new Lawrence Welk Show, and we're going to keep it, as you know, in the same format as Lawrence Welk. We're just doing more updated modern music because we couldn't do music from 1955. Who's going to know that in this generation?
If we have an orchestra, I don't know if we'll have an orchestra behind
No, we
us.
will. I'm going to orchestrate all that. Well, we're going to go back in time, but like 3/4 into the show, we'll do a nostalgia thing. But we have to...
Aren't you going to play Surrey with the fringe on top?
Well, I'll do some of that now.
Yeah, because that'd be a nice one. Dun, dun.
All right, let's do this for Lawrence Welk.
Yeah, Surrey with the fringe on top. Wouldn't that be a great one? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the spinning dryer. Spin and spin and spin in the dryer. Spin and spin and spin in the dryer. Spin and spin. It's a fascinating theorem today. Spin in the spinning dryer.
Yeah, I won't have time to do the whole thing, but that was... It's because no, but really, getting back to this new Lawrence Welk show, we're gonna we'll have the same gowns, the same everything. We'll just have to do more modern music, and then 2/3 in the show we can go back in time and do a Moon River or something and bring that back, and then I'm gonna add a classical segment.
Oh, good. Lawrence Welk did that.
Classical segment where we do a legitimate. Like, I'm going to do a piece of the Moonlight Sonata here. I won't do the whole thing because we won't have time because we're running out of time. Let me do the
George Cates would conduct the classical thing, some classical. If you remember the chord, George Cates
Let me
do
some of this Moonlight Sonata. I'll do the intro here. See, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Yeah. So we're going to incorporate that into this new show too. Isn't that pretty?
Yes. Yeah, it even shows, basically they were going to Mass. He was a devout Catholic. Lawrence Welk? Yeah, and many of his family members, the musical family, were devout Catholics too. One time, they all got up for a 5 a.m. Mass because even though he was traveling, he still wanted to get to Catholic Mass, so there he was. Even John Howard waited in the deserted lobby, was bright-eyed and fresh-faced, eager to go, and they did go through the Mass. It was 5:30 in the morning. We were almost the only worshipers there. But if the priest was startled to see our little group, he made no sign. He preached a full-length sermon and said a lovely Mass, his quiet voice on the altar echoing through the small nave church of the church, reminding me of the early morning Masses in Strasbourg. I reflected that no matter where you go, you find that same kind of reverence in churches everywhere, but somehow in the very early hours of the morning, it seems even more powerful. But yeah, he really wanted to go to the Catholic Mass, And
I'm going to stop on that note right there.
Yes.
But yeah, we're going to have all this classical thing, and I want to honor the memory of Lawrence Welk and the tradition of Lawrence Welk, and if we get this funding, we'll be doing that show every week, and it'll be fun to pass on the legacy of Lawrence Welk to the next generations and so on, because I don't think a lot of people would know him today,
I know,
or
sadly.
some of the people that were on his show. But I'm glad I got a chance to enjoy Lawrence Welk in my lifetime.
Same here.
Any final words you want to say?
Well, let's see. It's a real joke. It's fascinating. There were these two washing machines, and they were splashing around in a coffee cup. It was very fascinating. Then this one dryer came along and said, "Oh, I can't see around that." So I went to the other side of the room and started screaming about algebraic equations. Ah! Wasn't that hilarious?
Well, anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in to this latest edition of Asaph Cafe. And once again, through the magic of green screen, we're on the original Lawrence Welk Show. You can see Mr. Welk there in the background behind Emmett. I am your host, Asaph Adonai, and immediately on my left, affectionately, our aging rocker, Emmett. And I think before I conclude, let's play that theme to the Lawrence Welk Show again at the end.
Because they always did this at the end,
Yeah.
Let's see. Good night.
I'm doing it right now.
Good night. Sleep tight. And may the, oh dear, I can't even remember it. So here's a wish and a prayer that every dream come true. So now until then, something or another. How does it go? Adios, au revoir, RCDA. I can't remember that thing, but they always sing that, Yep.
I'll play it.
Yeah. Sorry, I can't remember. I've heard that so many times over the years, and I should have that memorized,
And And until our next show, Maranatha. And I'll end it. Oh, go ahead.
Good night, sleep tight, and pleasant dreams to you. There's a wish and a prayer. There we go. There we go.
Yeah, wish and a prayer, I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say it again until our next show, Maranatha. And I won't play our traditional "This Guy's in Love."
Okay.
I'll just end it with
right.
the theme to the Lawrence Welk Show.
All right.
Well, you make yourself at home, relax. I'll shut everything down, and we'll make a copy and just post this, and it'll be fun.
Oh, it will.
Talk about Mr. Welk and bring this show back, or
Yes.
this tribute, I should say, to him, back to life.
Absolutely.
Thanks for sitting in and sharing his autobiography.
Oh, it was
I'm sure
wonderful.
the television audience will appreciate
Yeah.
that.